affiliated with the Economic Research Forum, and I'm the founder of the Economic Society. So what I will be trying to do today is to give you an overview of the module we'll be doing this term, which is Econometrics. So, but before I look at the topics we will cover, I want first to discuss with you why we do economic research. Because as you will see in a minute, when we do econometrics is just a tool we try to use for research. Before I jump to that point, this is where you can find me online. So you can find me on Twitter, so you can follow me on Facebook, and Hanomics is my YouTube channel where this lecture is recorded. So I'll be uploading the videos on Hanomics. So after the lecture, straight away you can access the lecture on Hanomics, and this is my personal web page. So this is how to find me online. So let's just jump to the first point we would like to cover today. So as I said, the very important question we need to look at is why do we do research? Anyone would like to suggest an answer? Why do we do research? Why do we need research? Do we do research for the sake of research? Just want to be researchers? Or there must be a reason. So the main reason to do research is we want to find answers to questions, but in a formal and structured way. And that's why we do research. And that's why I want you to think carefully about what we do in this module in econometrics. It's very important to think of econometrics as a tool. Okay? So first you need to have your own story. You need to have your own research question. What is more interesting? What is interesting to you? So as I said, we write research papers then to convince others that we found the answers to those questions, because it's not only about telling people the results, it's about describing how did we find the answer to the question. So we try to sell the story to others. So we need to do this in a formal way and a structured way, and that's why we do research. So to write research papers, you could answer the question by writing a theoretical paper or empirical paper, or you have a paper that you combine both together. In a theoretical paper, you would, or the researcher would have, would make reasonable assumptions about economic agents involved and their circumstances, and based on that, they can project the economic outcome. So this is theoretically speaking. Okay. On the other side, if you do empirical research, so it depends on the research setup. It could be observational or experimental study. So observational study means that you, as a researcher, you just observe and collect data. You have no intervention, so you don't intervene in the outcome. But experimental study means that you, as a researcher, you design the experiment, you do the intervention, and then you have some kind of you intervene in the data production. So that's the main difference between both. In this module, we'll be focusing mainly on empirical research. As I said, you could combine both by combining both, having a theoretical paper that combines theoretical and empirical research together. So you build on specific assumptions, predict the outcome, and that's the theoretical part, and then you use actual data to test whether your predictions hold true in reality or not. So this is how we need to think about the research we do here, because this is what you need to produce, by the way. So that's what you will be asked to produce in your assessment, in your assignment. So, as I said, we'll be focusing on empirical research because the main point in this module is to learn how to apply different economic techniques to real-world data. So we need to think carefully about how we would write this in terms of a research paper, in terms of empirical research paper. So for an empirical research paper, or for any research paper, to be honest, you need to identify a research question. So that question needs to be a very specific question. You need to formulate this question and motivate it very clearly. Again, this is very important, not just for the assignment, as you will see at the end of this lecture, but also in your career, because if you work in a research center, or if you work in any in most places today that they would expect you to write reports, and to write a report you need to think as an economic researcher, you need to think in a very structured way. So you need to think about the question that you're trying to answer first, and how you write down the motivation for that question. So that has to be very, very clearly presented. The second step is to learn about your variables, the key variables, how they interact together, what do you expect. So for example, in economic theory, we expect when the price of a product increases, we expect the quantity demand will decrease. So this is what I expect. This is the theory. So when we come to the empirical part, that means we need to collect data and we need to see if this holds true or not. So we have some expectations about the variables in our model. Then it is important to look at what has been done to date. So you need to explore published research that would expose you to existing work, which is a very good source of knowledge about data available, empirical techniques, if there's any limitation to those techniques or not. Because again, when you write a research paper, and also in your assignment for this module, you will be expected to highlight any limitations to any technique that you will use in your report. And then you see when econometrics comes, or where econometrics comes, that comes at the end. So you have your story first, you have your question first. What I'm trying to do here, what am I trying to answer here? So the question, that's where we start, that's the motivation. The motivation, by the way, is why you are interested in this question. Why should I read your paper? Why should I read your work? Why should I care about the problem? Okay? Who cares about this report? Who should read your report? That's the motivation. Why this question is important. And remember, this should be an interesting and a specific research question. So the answer to the question why comes here in the motivation. Why should I care about this research? Why should I read this paper? Okay? Again, this is a very important step. So you see where econometrics falls here? It comes at the end. So econometrics is a tool. And that's what most people forget. Okay? So first, I need to think of this. What is this? Why am I doing this research? Why this research is interesting? Why should people read my work? That is a very important question. So this is where you start, not with econometrics. I see people coming with some ideas and say, how can this go with econometrics? How can we apply this? Which method, which technique we should use? That's the wrong way to think about it. You need to think about this first. So start with this point. What is your research question? Why is it important? Why should I read it? Who should care about your research? And then what I called here theoretical background. Most people would think that if I have an empirical paper, or if I'm doing empirical research, why should I care about theory? You should care about theory. That is the most important part, because in regressions or in econometrics, if you put any two variables in a software, they'll give you a relationship. So it doesn't matter really whether there's a relationship between these two variables or not. So first you need to think about this background. Even if you're not going to write a theoretical paper, you still need to think about this. What should I expect? What is my expectation? How these two variables relate to each other. So that is an important thing. Okay? So this is the second step. That's what you need to think of. And then when you look around about what is being done today, this is another important step, because that will tell you what we know and what we don't know. What are the limitations for these different empirical techniques? Okay? What is the limitation around the data as well? Where to get data from? How to measure these variables? All these questions, you will find your answer here when you look at, that's what we call the literature review, when you look at published work. So again, you see the steps, then don't jump to this, before going through this process. So you don't jump to econometrics before you finish your work. So you need to first understand where you're going and where you're going to take this to. Then comes the econometrics. Okay? So as I said, in this module we'll be mainly thinking that way. That's what we're going to be doing, and that is what you are expected to produce at the end of this term. Okay? So, for some reason the pointer is not working, so let me just... Yeah, so this is an example. This is a paper that came recently in the Quarter Review of Economics and Finance. This is my co-author paper with Dr. Osman Attar from Manchester University and Professor Phil Murphy. The question here, catching the mirage, the shadow impact of financial crisis. This is an empirical paper. So, what we wanted to do in this paper. First, that's how we thought about the paper. So first, we have a research question. What we're trying to do, what we're trying to answer, which question we're trying to answer. What's the question that we are interested in? So the question was how the shadow economy behaves in times of financial crisis. So whether the shadow economy or the informal sector or the underground economy, sometimes it's called, how this react or respond to financial shocks or financial crisis. That's an empirical question. Or we try to write an empirical paper to answer that question. So before we jump to econometrics, then we need to do what? So that's the question. So what is the next step? What we need to do? So what should we expect? Yeah? What is your expectation? What do you expect for the outcome here? Whether the size of the informal sector or the shadow economy or the underground economy or the unrecorded economy. So all these names for the same thing. Okay? So what is your expectation yourself when there is a financial shock, when there is a financial crisis? Will the size of the the shadow economy expand, or it will be smaller because of the shock? Okay, so you think it will expand, you think it will contract. That's why we need to look at previous work. We need to look at what economic theory tells us. So there are two effects here. So income effect and substitution effect. So you're right, and you're right as well. So these are to expect. That's what we expect. So if we look at income effect, that means that the shock or the crisis hit the whole economy. Both sides of the economy, the official economy and the shadow economy. So if that is the case, that means both will be affected by the shock, and that means the size of the shadow economy is expected to shrink or to be smaller. Okay? The substitution effect suggests that those who will lose their jobs in the formal sector, they will try to find a job in the informal or in the shadow economy, in the part of the economy. That means the side of the shadow economy will, or the unrecorded economy will expand. Okay? So you see these are going the opposite directions, income effect and substitution effect. Just imagine these are like the theoretical expectation. This is not based on any data. This is what we may expect how the shadow economy behave in times of financial crisis. Okay, so you see, we didn't jump to the econometrics yet. We need to think carefully about the outcome. We need to think carefully about the theory, what or how these two variables will be related in time of financial crisis, or how the shadow economy will behave in times of financial crisis. So the final outcome, what we will see is the interaction between both, okay, income effect and substitution effect. We didn't jump to the econometrics yet because, as I said, econometrics will come last, will come at the end. Because how can you measure what is meant to remain in the shadow? That's another question. That's another challenge. And that's why it's called catching the mirage. It's something that is never meant to be measured. It's difficult to see. It's difficult to measure. And that's why we came up with some suggestion how we can do so. So you can read the paper. I'm not going to go into details in the paper, but what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to tell you how you could think in a very structured way and step by step to do your paper or your report. Okay, so that's another issue. Then, how did we know about this? these issues we know from the literature review. When we look at the previous work, we see what other people have done to date, and this, how can we really contribute to this? Can we add something? Can we suggest something different? We did in this paper. We suggested a different way to measure the size of the shared economy, and then, because that was the major challenge, and that's why, if I take you back to the previous slide, that's the idea. Exploring published research exposes you to existing work, and this is a good source of knowledge about any limitations, any problems or any measurement issues, any problems with the data, any limitation to the empirical techniques that were used in this research, etc. So this is a very important step. So you need to think that way, you need to work that way, and you need to work in your report that you will be producing for this module as part of your assignment at the end in this way. Okay? We'll come back to this point later. So this is just an example how we did, how we thought of this paper, and here comes the econometrics. Then once we now know the problems, we know the issues, how we're going to deal with these issues, we came up with some ideas about how we could face these or address these issues, and then comes the econometrics. So again, let me take you back to the first point. Econometrics is just a tool. So you need to think of what you're doing, not just the tool itself. Of course, you should use the appropriate method, not just any method. You should be aware of any limitations of the econometric technique that you're using. So this is something that should be very clear from the beginning. So there's something I need to learn about. This is something I need to be aware of. Okay? So, but what I'm trying to say here is where or when you think of the tool. So you need to think first of your question. You need to think first of what should I expect, and then what has been done to date, and then comes the econometrics, which method I would use to address this question. What we've used in this paper was country-specific VAR models. We have a number of countries. We wanted to see how the shared economy in these countries respond to financial shocks, and then we used the vector autoregressive model. This is one of the techniques that we will cover in this module, and we used panel VAR as well. So what next then? What should come next? So now we're waiting for the answer. So what was the question? What was the question, guys?
How the shadow economy behaves.
Exactly. So how the shadow economy behaves in time of financial crisis. And the question is, or the outcome, what we expect is either it expands, okay, or shrink. Okay. So now when we get data, when we collect data, we use econometrics, we need to give an answer to that question. And that question was, the answer was, it does. It expands during the financial crisis. What does that mean?
The substitution.
Exactly, but why is it important? Why should I care about this? Why should I care if whether the size of the shared economy expands in time of financial crisis? Why is it important to me? Who would care about this? Policymakers. But what is the main conclusion here? What is the advice? What would I recommend then as a researcher? So this is something very important you need to think of, and that's why your research is important, because if it doesn't produce this, if it doesn't give this, then what is the point? Okay? It's not just a way to demonstrate that you're mastering econometrics or some econometric techniques. You need, at the end of the day, you need to show me something. You need to tell me, so what? Okay? So one of the suggestions or recommendation in this paper, as I said, you could read it later on, but the main point here is, and probably we'll come back later to this paper when we do our models. So the main conclusion is, yes, it does. It expands during the shared economy. The size of the shared economy becomes larger in times of financial crisis, and this increase in size is not persistent over time. So it's not something that it will continue forever. So based on that, we thought that it's a good idea to relax any anti-shadow measures in time of financial crisis. Why? Because the economy has a chance, or the shadow economy gives the economy a chance to absorb the shock by providing employment to those who lost their jobs in the formal economy. Okay, so again, that could be a recommendation based on, so would it be appropriate just to tell people, hey guys, that was the question and that's what I suggest? No. We agreed from the beginning, it's not about telling people. You need to convince people. You need to show them how you did this in a systematic way, in a structured way, in a formal way. So we need to describe the process. And we need to be very frank. We need to be very honest about what limitations were in the way. And that was in the paper as well, so you can go back to the paper. So that is like an indication of a good, or a sign of a good paper, or a good piece of work, if you're really aware of the limitations. Okay? So don't worry about, you need to tell the limitations. So that adds value to your work. Okay? Because economists usually try to show that they understand everything. But the fact is that we don't. Do we? Okay? So it's good to be very honest with yourself, at least. I mean, with people as well. Okay? So that's the idea here. So again, just going back to this example, and then I will jump to a more formal way of introducing this module by looking at regression models in a more formal way. So the main idea here is that, as I said, in this module we'll be focusing on how to do empirical research, how to use real-world data to address real questions. So we need, you will come up with the questions, by the way. So this is something, again, I'll come back to at the end when I talk about the module and assessment. So this is the way I need you to think. So know where econometrics comes. First, you need to think of your question. What is the research question? And if you look at the module handbook, this is something that you need to come up with. So you're going to choose your own research question. Okay? And then you need to think of what should I expect? How these variables relate to each other. And then if there's any issue that I need to address, then comes econometrics. And then which tool, which model, which method is more appropriate given all the limitations, all the data I have, etc. And the research question as well. And then you need to come up with a conclusion and tell me why your research is important, or what should I learn from your research. So what is the message in your report? Okay? So that's a very important thing before we jump to econometrics, or we jump to regression models. Any questions? By the way, you can stop me at any time. Just ask questions as we go. Okay? So I'll give you a chance to ask at the end. But again, if you have any questions, just feel free to stop me at any time. Okay? Good. So that's the first part. So the first part is why and how we do economic research. And that's very important. Again, it's not just because of the assessment. That's why you're going to do the assessment. You need to produce a report following these steps, and you're going to start from the scratch. So it's your report. You come up with the research question, you look at what is being done today, and choose the appropriate technique that you will apply. Of course, I will expect you to use one of the techniques that we cover in the module, not outside the module. Okay? So we'll come to the topics we'll cover in this module later. So, in a more formal way, that's what we do. And when you get your hand dirty and do econometrics, it's very simple. So we have a variable. Why? We want to explain that variable. Okay? We use a set of explanatory variables, x, 1 to xk, and we want to use this. We need to collect data and to explain the behavior of this one. The behavior of call it the dependent variable, explained, regressant, or outcome variable, call it whatever you want. The same thing applies to x, has many names, independent, explanatory, regressors, projectors, or provides. So wherever. And so this part plus this error term, or sometimes we call it disturbance, stochastic, or random term. So this is a very general way to write an econometric model. You could write it in a more compact way, this way. So x here, this bold letter here. So it just represents all these x's. So this is just a vector of regressors. So what we do, so this is the population model. So what we're trying to do here, we're trying to, by the way, the population, I would expect you to know what do I mean by population. Population, any well-defined entity, could be people, could be firms, could be cities, states, countries, or wherever. Okay? So what we're trying to do now, or just going back to the main model, we have two parts. The deterministic component, which is this part. So this is the deterministic component. Okay? Plus the stochastic part, which is the error term part. Okay? So that means any individual y value would be equal to the mean value of the population plus or minus some error. So, for example, if I want to, if y represent family expenditure, if I want to model family expenditure on food, and if x was family income, then what we learn from this equation here is that the mean food expenditure of all families with the same level of income, that would be represented by the deterministic component. Plus or minus a random component that varies from one individual to another and will depend on several factors. So going back to the model, so this is the deterministic part. Okay, so this is the mean value plus some kind of error, plus or minus. Okay, any questions so far? So what is the main job here? What is our job here? So you've done econometrics before, I'm sure. I'm sure you've done it. So what is the main objective here? What we're trying to do here when we have this model? So this is the population or the true model. Okay, what we need to do?
The relationship between
Yeah, how are we going to see the relationship between the independent and the dependent variables? How many of you have done econometrics before? Okay, so some of you haven't. Okay, some have done econometrics before. So, and that's the problem. When we do econometrics, we think of the tool more than the intuition or the idea. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to estimate these parameters. That's how you get the relationship between these two. So I need these betas, the value of these betas. That's my job. Okay, as an econometrician or as a researcher, that's what I'm trying to do. But how am I going to do this? Well, this is the population. I need to collect data about this population. But can I study the entire population? I can't. So that's why we look at the sample. That's why we draw a sample that should represent, if it is a random sample, should be a good representative of the whole population. And using this data, I need to get the values of these betas. Okay? And that's how I know the relationship between this and this. Okay? Given the sample or the data I have and the estimation method I followed. But before we jump to this, let's just discuss what you said now. This is the relationship between X and Y, which is presented. So this is the objective. This is the primary objective. So we want to use this, but how are we going to do this? We're going to do this through a sample. But before we jump to this point, going back to the main point we said before, you need to think of theory. Causal relationships or regression is different. So causal relationship should be based on theory. Okay? This is what we call our expectation. Do you remember the shadow economy? When he said it should, so theoretically speaking, we would expect that the shadow economy, the size of the shadow economy, could increase or shrink, as he said, or increase after a financial shock. Okay? So this has to be built on a theoretical model or the economic theory. Okay? So that's what I said. So this should be, so the relationship between y and x should be based on theory. Because there's nothing will stop you. Nothing will stop you from moving these two around the other way. You could have x, so you could run a regression between, you could say x depends on y. So nothing will stop you. So why we have y in the left-hand side, and x on the right-hand side? Because that has to be based on a theory. That x is one variable that affects or explain the behavior of y. So going back to our naive example of family expenditure on food, which is y, depends on family income. So if you go to eViews, the software we'll use in this module, or even any other statistical software, and you put them the other way around, it's not going to tell you, stop, you're doing something wrong. It's never going to stop you. Okay? So the idea here is that you as a researcher need to think of this based on theory. And that's why I was keen to start the lecture with what we need to do, how we should do empirical research. So you need to build this relationship based on something. Okay? Most people would think of economic theory or a theoretical model that explains the relationship between these two variables. You don't have to come up with this model. You could use some other people's work. So many people would have done this. Or you could come up with your own explanation or own theoretical model to explain the relationship between x and y. Anyway, so that is a very important point. That's why I started with these 4 steps that you need to follow before you use econometrics. You need to think that way first. Okay, so we already talked about the error term, which is the a kind of a catch-all for all variables that cannot be introduced in your model. Okay, so let's look at the coefficients then. What we have. We have an equation 1. So remember, that's what we want to get to estimate the value of beta 0, beta 1 to beta k. So we need to know how much are these. So beta 0 is the intercept, beta 1 to k, these are the slope coefficients, and these are partial rate of change in the mean value of y for a unit change in the value of a regressor for any of your x's, and then you assume that the other variables are constant. The very famous statement ceteris paribus means nothing else changed. So that means the partial rate of change in the mean value of y. Okay, so that means we assume that other variables didn't change when we interpret or explain the value of one of these betas. Okay, as we said, so we can't do this through the population for many reasons, or for obvious reasons. You can't collect data, but if you want to see how, wherever your research question is, let's say, we're looking at the effect or the impact of changing tuition fees in UK, for example. So the population here is all the university tuition fees. So the university, all students who do a degree or who are expected to do a degree, for example, next year. Okay, and then you need to ask all of them. That's the population. So you can't do that. Okay, so this is not a practical way to do research. You need to think of a sample that represents this population. Then this is where the data come from. So we take a sample that should represent the entire population. And so what we will have is not betas. We will have estimation of beta. So that's why it's called estimation, because it's not the true value of beta. So we don't know the true value of beta because we didn't collect data about the whole population, and also we don't have all variables that affect y included in the model. Why don't we do that? Why don't we just simply plug everything? So let's just assume or pretend for a second that I can collect data about the entire population. Why don't we just put all variables that affect y in this equation, so I wouldn't need this error term? Is it possible?
You'll have too many variables.
Too many variables, even if you know them, by the way. So in most cases, there will be variables that you can't measure, even if you know them, or you simply don't know that they have some impact on Y. Okay, so that's why we have to have this error term. Okay, and again, you just need to think, why are we doing this? Don't take things as they are. So you need to think, and I'm hoping that this, through this module, you will think more about what the econometrics you've done in the past, and how would you build on that. So anyway, so let's jump to the point then. So we have a sample that represent the population, the entire population, and then we need to use this to estimate the value of these betas, which we called here B. So the small letter here, that means that it comes from the sample. Okay, and that is just an estimator. Some people would call it beta hat. Okay, remember beta hat. So the small letter just means that we obtain this through some kind of estimation, and that's what we're gonna look at now. So the most popular method is the OLS method, and I'm sure you've done this before, ordinary least square method. And in a simple, simply what it does, it minimizes the error sum of square, which is what you see here. So we want the error to be as minimum as possible. Because why would we want that? There's an error, yeah? So this is the error term. So we want this to be the sum of square of this error to be as small as possible. And if you want to do this, you could actually take derivative of this with respect to, for example, if you want to get beta B1 or beta hat 1, so you get the derivative, so you get the first derivative of this with respect to x1, make it equal to 0, and so on for the others as well, for beta 2 and up to beta k. But luckily now, we don't need to do that. We can use software to do that for us. Okay, but you still need to understand the main point of ordinary least square. Okay, so you need to, what we have is what we're trying to achieve here is to minimize the error sum of square, and this is this expression. So we want to minimize this. Okay, how would we do this? As I say, we take the first derivative and make it equal 0. Okay. Then we make some assumptions about our model, and our job, our task, is to make sure that these assumptions are valid. Okay, so these are the assumptions we make. We assume that the model is linear parameters. The regressors are fixed or non-stochastic. The expected value of the error term is 0. We also assume that we have a constant variance of errors. No autocorrelation, no multicollinearity, and no specification bias. So if these assumptions are true, and that's what we call the classical linear regression model assumptions, if these hold true, then the OLS estimator, which we represented here, so what does the OLS estimator do? It minimizes the error sum squares. It minimizes this expression. It makes.
So is that just the same as taking each x away from the mean and then adding or taking the
No. Because what you do, this is the error term, is y minus what you had in the left-hand side. If you go back to this equation, okay, so the error term is just, this is the sample equation. So the error term, sorry. So this u here, so if you take this, all this side, so that's u equal this minus all this. That's what you see. And then you don't minimize the difference, you minimize the square, because some of the points, just imagine this is the mean value. So these x's, the deterministic components, this is the mean value. This is the line, the regression line. Some of the values will be above this line. some of the values will be below that line. Okay? And if you just sum these, you add these together, they will cancel each other. And that's why we square them. So you get the square of the sum of the errors. So you don't minimize, as I said here, you don't, so you don't minimize the sum of the error term because, as I said, some positive values will cancel the other negative values, but it will cancel them out. But instead of that, we minimize the error sum of square. Okay? And again, this is where it comes from the same, the general equation that we've seen in the beginning. Okay. And these are the assumptions, and as I said, our task is to make sure that these assumptions are valid, and if they are not valid, what to do. What kind of remedy we need to do, and whether we still be able to use OLS or we need to use a different method. Okay, so that's a very important thing. So if these hold true, if they are valid, then what we have here that the OLS estimator, again, this. So the OLS estimator is blue. Is blue. Blue means best linear unbiased estimator. So linear means the estimators are linear function in the dependent variable. Unbiased means that in repeated samples, the estimators approach the true parameter. Okay? So remember when we looked at how the students think or what is the effect on the students when the tuition fees, the university tuition fees increased. We didn't look at all students, the population, the entire population. We picked some sample, and if you change that sample, so the value of beta hat will change. So your estimation will change. You will come up with different numbers. Okay. So the idea here is that in repeated samples, so as you do this again and again and again, the estimators should, on average, should approach so the expected value of this beta hat should be very close to the true parameter beta. And the last one, which is the best. So that means it has the minimum variance, and that's why we call it the best estimator. So that's B, best. So that means it has the minimum variance. So these are the assumptions, and when they are valid, then all these estimators are blue. Okay, so we ready to start again. So so the first part of this lecture, we looked at why and how we do economic research. That's a very important point. And then we looked at, in a very brief way, we looked at, can you see it? Thank you. Okay, so we looked at, So we looked at how the basic setup for a regression model, where we have a dependent variable, we have a set of regressors and an error term, and what we would do in all this estimation, and what the assumptions we make. So in this example, very quickly, we look at a very, very naive and simple example, but it tells us, it does the job. It tells us what we need to know about a regression model. So the first thing, let's say we want to estimate a regression model that explains people's wealth. So let's assume that, well, in this case, wealth is the dependent variable, wealth is the y variable, and then we look at what factors determine how much wealthy an individual is. That could be income, age, family size, and any other factor. So if we assume that these, for a minute, these are the main variables, or these are the main factors that make somebody rich or wealthy, so income, age, family size, so we could collect data about these variables. And the data we have, and this data, by the way, on Blackboard now, so just in case if you want to practice, if you want to use the data set to produce the same results again. and these data come from Wooldridge Introductory Econometrics 4th edition. So you'll find the data set on Blackboard. So this is the data we have. We have 4 variables: wealth, and this is measured in thousands of dollars. You have income. This is annual income in thousands of dollars. Age in years, and family size, which is the number of individuals living in the family. So this is the kind of model we're looking at. So wealth here, this is Y. We have income, age, family size, plus, so this is the deterministic component, and plus an error term. So what we need to do, we need to use the data that comes from a sample. We already have the data set. We have, which we said, this is 9,275 individuals. We met them. We asked them about their income, their age, the family size, how many people or how many people live with them in the family. So it's very simple, as we said. So now if we're going to follow, or if we're going to apply OLS estimation in this equation, so what does OLS do? Exactly. So it minimizes the sum square of this of the error term. So you don't need to do that. You just need to use the software. Yeah. So very. If we assume that you're familiar with eViews, but if you haven't ever used eViews before, so don't worry. I'll show you at the end what to do. So anyway, so let's assume now we are familiar with eViews for a second, and we used eViews to estimate this equation, and this is the output. This is what eViews produces. Again, I'll assume you're familiar with eViews, but if you're not, don't worry. I'll come back to this point, and I'll tell you what you need to do in case if you haven't used eViews before. So at the end, this is the estimation. This is what we had. So this is what is this? Do you remember? The intercept, yeah, or the constant. And these are the beta hat. So this is the estimation, the OLS estimation of that equation. So our job now is to interpreters to explain these results. Again, so what can we conclude from this equation? Can anyone tell us? So why are we doing this regression? Why are we doing this econometrics? As I said, this is a very naive, very simple example, but I really want to look at why we're doing this now. Do you remember the research question? So why do we do research again? So I'll keep going back to the same point. Why do we do research? We know we need to answer questions. Yeah? So what was the question? So if you forget the question, then you get lost in the middle. And that's why you write something that doesn't make any sense, okay, in your report. Because you forget the main question. Why am I doing this? What was the research question? What I'm looking at? I want to explain what factors, what determinants that can make somebody wealthy. Okay? So we thought of that these are the most important factors, and we include them in a model. So now we need to explain this. So the idea is not just you do a few clicks on eViews and get something. The idea is after that you need to explain what that means. Is that right? Okay. So some of you have done econometrics before. So what does that mean? Okay. Okay. So you looked at the sign. So income and age. Okay. So they are the increase. That means the more income you have, the wealthier you'll be, or you are expected to be. The older you are, okay. So, but then, is this the main conclusion I can come up with? And again, if the family size. No, you need to think of each one of those what they mean. So the first one, very easy. The intercept, which is this part, beta zero had this one. Okay, so that means if all these are 0, so if your income is 0, doesn't make sense when you say age is 0, and then family members, family size 0,
that means this will be how much wealth you will have. Remember, we measure wealth by thousands of dollars. Does that make sense? It doesn't make any sense, okay? Because wealth cannot be zero. It cannot be negative, and also, what does it mean when you say when age is zero? But the idea here, most econometricians would suggest to keep the intercept even if it is not meaningful. You still should keep it in the regression equation. But technically, how we interpret, how we explain this here is that assuming that all these are zeros, so income, age, family size, then this will be the average or the mean value of wealth. So on average, that's how much you will have. Okay? Again, it doesn't make sense. It's negative sign. Wealth cannot be, so you can have minus $52 or thousands of dollars. Okay? But anyway, so it's still not meaningful, but we still, most people would recommend to keep the intercept, even if it is not meaningful. So let's jump to the other point. The other one is the income. So I understand you said there's a kind of positive relationship, or when income increases, wealth increases, but by how much? That's why we do research. That's why we pick up. That's why we drew the sample, and that's why we want that sample to be a good representative of the entire population, and etc. So at the end, to be able to say when your income increased by 1 unit, and given that we measure income by thousands of dollars, so that means $1,000. Okay, then wealth would increase by 0.74 of that unit, which means that of $1,000, which means $974. But it's very important, you remember ceteris paribus, it's very important to assume that the other factors are constant. So again, what we're doing today is just as an introduction, we're trying to get you back to think of the basics of econometrics and why we do econometrics and how we interpret these coefficients. So in the next week and probably in the till the end of the this term, I would expect you to do more than just looking at something that you've done in the past and trying to remember what that means. Okay, so what I would expect you, as you will see at the end, to be able to produce your own reports. Okay, and then I'll be happy to give you feedback in these reports, and you will be using the econometric techniques that we would cover in the lecture. Anyway, so in a similarly, you could interpret age. So when age increases by 1 unit, so that means by 1 year, by a year, then wealth increases on average by 1 point blah blah blah, which is like $1,013 and etc. So you still assume income and family size are held constant, so they don't change as well. The same thing applies to the family size. And just to jump quickly through the model, because this is a very naive example, and I expect that you know what that means. So that's why I'm just jumping or skipping some of the slides. But if you want to judge, or if you want to make some kind of comment about the entire model, the goodness of it, of how good your model is, you look at the R square, and in our case here, that means that this model explains 17.3% of the change in the in wealth. So what does that mean? So what about the rest? So it explains only 17.3% of the change in wealth. Would that be a good model, or wouldn't it be a good model? Okay, let me tell you what. So it's something we'll look at later. So it's because this is cross-section data, so we're looking at different units, we're looking at different individuals. So in general, like when you do econometrics, you will see that the R square with cross-section data is very low. Anyway, with time series, you will see it high. So we'll see 80%, 70%, 90% with time series econometrics. Okay, and we'll do both, by the way. So in this module, we'll cover both. But anyway, so this doesn't say much, because individuals are very different. So they are heterogeneous. They are not the same. They're not very similar, and that's why it's very difficult to find a high value for R square in a study that is based on cross-sectional data. So this was cross-sectional data. So anyway, so it's not something that we could say this is really a bad model. No, it doesn't mean that. I know 17% is a bit low, but it doesn't mean you'll even find some published work with much less than that, lower than 17%. So it doesn't mean that it's a bad model or anything. It just says that these three variables, income, age, family size, explain 17% of the change in wealth. Anyway, so of course you could test how much I can trust this. You could do a t-test to test whether income has a significant impact or a statistically significant impact on individuals' net wealth, and you use a t-test. Again, this is just a very quick reminder of what probably you've done before, and it would be important for those who haven't done econometrics before to go and look at these details, these small things, these basic ideas in more detail, and I will refer to some resources at the end of the lecture where you can find these if you need it to. Anyway, you still can judge the whole, look at the whole model. The way you report your regression equation is very important, because this is one of the things that I don't like to see in your reports, is to have, I know I did it in my lecture notes, I don't want to see that in your reports. I want to see that in your reports. Okay, so the way you report the results, the way you report your estimation is very important. I would expect from, I mean, with first-year students, I tell them, don't do that. Don't put snapshot of eViews output, because this is not what I expect from you. I expect from you this one. Okay, if you have to, you could put what you want in appendix, but believe me, I don't want to look at it. Okay, I don't really want to look at it. I want something more like, and that's by the way, you will see it in the assignment. I want like kind of a published work style, or something like a proper research report. So don't just take a snapshot of what you've done and show me that you've done it that way. I don't want to see that. I just want to see you report it properly. Anyway, so you could use, say, the same thing through the b-value. So if you have the b-values smaller than, very small b-value like this, so then you reject the null hypothesis, and that means, for example, here income has a statistically significant impact on wealth. So again, these are very basic things that we can do with this model. When we do econometrics, we test hypotheses. We make some hypotheses, we test them, and that can tell us whether each one of those variables, income, age, and family size, whether they have a significant impact on wealth. So I could also look at the model as a whole, so which we call the joint hypothesis. So you could test whether beta 1 equal beta 2 equal beta 3 equal 0. So this is your null hypothesis against whether at least one of these is not, or the r square equal 0, or at least one of those is not equal to 0. And again, rather than looking at this, doing this, you could easily look at what eViews produce and is here. So that's the F statistic, and this is the probability value of the F statistics, and it's very small. That means we reject the null hypothesis. That means the whole model is, or the model is significant. Okay. Do you have any question? Am I skipping this too fast? I'm going through this too fast, because I expect you've got some idea about what I'm saying. But if you feel like I'm going too fast, just stop me. Okay? If you want to remember anything you've done before, that's fine. So it's not a problem. So the main idea here is just we're looking at a very naive and simple example on how we estimate an econometric model. So we're using OLS to explain how or the determinants of wealth. So, and we looked at 3 variables, and we see how we use this estimation. Again, so these are things that you could do. Also, you could look at whether income, is it important to include income and age in this model or not, which we call exclusion restriction. So you could have another hypothesis where you test whether beta 2 equal beta 3 equal 0 or not. And this is very easy to do in eViews. So in the coursework, you choose what you want to do. So I'm not asking you to do OLS, to do VAR model, to do a panel data model. So it is entirely up to you. So you do what you want to do. So we'll cover a few topics, which I'll explain later. But then in your coursework, it is your decision. You're now a researcher, and that's how I treat you now, and that's what I want you to do. I want you to think of the question that you need to answer first, and then do the steps that I discussed in the beginning, and then before you come to the econometrics. When you come to the econometrics, then you choose the appropriate technique based on what kind of data you have and you research the question, the question you want to answer. So this is something that you need yourself. You need to decide on. Okay? And that's why I want you to get, that's the main message in this module. I want you to be in that situation where you will think of a specific question, or research question that you think it is interesting to know or to find an answer for, and then go and learn more about that question, then collect your data, think of which method to apply. In a typical econometrics course, what we'd expect is, I give you the data set, I'll tell you here's the methodology I want, or this is the technique I want you to apply, and then go and do that, which is kind of you replicating what we do in the seminars. So this is not what I want to do. Okay, what I want you to do is to think from the scratch. Think about the question first. I want you to put yourself in this situation. Now you're doing research. I need to think of what kind of questions I want to answer, and it's entirely up to you. So you choose the question that you are interested in. Look around you. Think of the modules you cover. Think of things you've read before. What I would like to do. What would you like to do? Okay, and this will help you with the dissertation at the end of, by the way. So you're supposed to do a dissertation in term 2, and then that is a good time to think of what topic you want to do. Okay? Anyway, so it's entirely up to you what technique, what econometric method or technique you apply, but the most important thing that I will be looking at is whether you really understand what you're doing, whether you really understand the limitation of the technique you applied or not. That is what I'm looking at. Okay? So again, as I said, these lectures are recorded, so even if I skipped something too fast and you didn't, I mean, of course, I really want you to stop me. I really want you to ask me to repeat things, but if you haven't and you want to go back to these, you still can look at the slides, the lecture recording, and also you can come and discuss this with me during my office hours. All these, I'll come back to these later. But just let's go back to the main point. Forget about that example. So the main idea is how we do econometrics, how we think about doing empirical research. So we have a research question. We look at what the theory suggests. We look at how we expect these variables or the main variables to relate to each other, and then we look what has been done, literature review, what people wrote before us. So, and then you don't reinvent the wheel, yeah? So you're not doing the same thing again. You need to start where people, are now. So you can't just ignore what people have done over the years. So you need to think of what they've done and why am I doing this and how am I going to do it. So anyway, so that was a very naive example, as I said, about. So I'll skip that one now because I'm afraid we're running out of time, and I really want to go to the important point in this lecture, which is what topics we want to cover. But I think what we did already is very important too, because that tells you how you should think and what I'm expected from you. That's the way I expect you to think, and that's what's gonna come up in the assignment in a minute. So I'll skip this one because don't worry about eViews, because we'll do this in the seminars. So we'll do this in more details. And the surprise actually is not what I'm going to do, is that you will be doing it all by yourself. So I'll tell you how. Anyway, so let's just jump to the main point here. So this is the summary of what we wanted to do, even following this naive example about wealth and what kind of factors or determinants affect wealth, and how we use this in a regression model, and how we estimate the betas, and how we interpret the betas, etc., and how we can say something about the goodness of fit of the model, and how we test hypotheses. All that you should know already. But even if you forget it, even if you want to refresh your mind about these things, I'll tell you where to go, and that's absolutely fine. Okay? So let's now go to the main point, which is the module overview. What we are going to do in this term. So the main idea is that this module should provide you with the theoretical and practical knowledge of econometric techniques. So we need to learn some econometric techniques, and the most important part is how to use this in a real world situation, how to use this, how to collect real data. And that's why I insist that you, in your assignment, I'm not going to give you the question, I'm not going to give you the technique to use, I'm not going to give you the data set. It is your job. It's not my job. Okay? So you need to think about the question. You need to think about how you're going to address that question. Okay? And don't worry about what techniques you use, as long as you understand what you're using. As long as you believe this is the appropriate one. So you don't have to apply everything we do. You just need to pick up only one method to follow. Anyway, so that's the bottom line here. So how to use real world data to answer a real question. And that's what I expect you to do. So my job is to guide you through the process, but I'm not going to do it for you. So you need to do it yourself. You need to think carefully about it. So, as I said, at the end, you should be able to use statistical techniques to answer or to apply it in economic and financial like data or related questions. You should be able to understand, interpret your estimations, etc. And the software, as I said, we'll be using is eViews. And as I said before, if you haven't used eViews before, it's not a problem. I'll refer you to a very rich source, lots of resources on training resources on eViews website. I'll show you the link now. That takes you from the scratch to how to master eViews. So again, this is not something I will be teaching you. This is something that you need to do yourself, and I'll tell you how now. I'll be guiding you through. That's the main point. Anyway, so this is the content. So this is what the topics that we will cover this term. We already started talking about linear regression model, and this is kind of a revision of what you've done before. So what I would expect you to do, if you forget about or less linear regression or anything I say today, you need really to go and visit the basics again, because this is something we need to build on. Okay, and again, I'll tell you what to do about this. So next lecture we'll be looking at, these are the assumptions we made about the error term, and as I said, when these assumptions are valid, when these assumptions hold true, the old estimator is blue. But unfortunately, this is not the case in most situations. So you will have problems with correlation, heteroscedasticity, and etc. So we need to learn how to deal with this. So probably the next lecture I'll be covering again, revising these parts. From probably the week after, then we'll start with time series econometrics. So we'll focus on time series issues like unit root, configuration techniques, and then Ash and Gash models, etc. After that, we'll look at panel data methods like fixed effect, random effect, dynamic panel. And toward the end of the term, we'll be looking at simultaneous equation systems, identification, estimation, and probably the last 2 weeks or the last week, we'll be looking at the limited dependent variables models. As you can see, these are different techniques, different models. I'm not going to tell you, for example, hey, you should use panel data, use a fixed effect model, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to tell you what to use. This is your decision. This is now you're in a situation that you need to look at the research question you picked, the research question you want to address, you want to answer, and then you think about the data, you think about what people have done before in the past, and the limitations about these different techniques, and which one you believe is the most appropriate, given all of that. which technique of those. So I don't expect you to do something beyond this, but I want you to master these. I want you to think carefully about which one of these. Because if you come to that point where you can choose which one is a proper technique, is the proper technique or the most appropriate technique, and you can defend that, this is more than enough for this module. Okay. So anyway, so these are the topics we will cover for the rest of the term. And here's the assessment. So this is what I've been talking about all the time. The assessment for this module is structured as you see now. So 40% individual coursework and 60% the final exam. This is the question for the coursework. So you should write a short report in which you demonstrate your fluency in applying one or more of the econometric techniques covered in this module. So again, going back what these topics are. So this is what I'm talking about. Where is it? Yeah. So choose one or more of these. That's what you're going to use. Okay? And most important thing in your report, you're expected to use real data. And I'll record some videos to show you where to get data from. Okay? If you go to Hanomics, my YouTube channel, there are 2 or 3 videos that show you how to use data stream, videos show you how to use the World Bank database. So you could go and just watch these videos, probably 5 minutes or 10 minutes each. So it's not really long videos. So if you don't know where to get data from, just look at Hanomics, and you'll find 2 or 3 videos show you where to get data from. Probably we'll do another video about Bloomberg. We have access to Bloomberg in the school. So again, the school provide plenty of resources, plenty of databases where you get data, real data from. So that's what I want you to do. So I want you to think of the question, and then I'm happy to guide you through the process, where to find data and how to collect this data. So this should be absolutely fine. So this shouldn't be a problem. But the bottom line here, that you need to answer a real question. You need to use real world data, okay, to answer this question. So your question has to be a very clear and specific research question of your own. So I'm not going to give you the research question. Okay? So I'm not going to give you the question that you need to answer. So it is your job now is to think as a researcher, is to think of what question is important to address, and how am I going to do that. Okay? I'm happy to discuss the questions you pick with you. That's fine, absolutely fine. But I'm not going to tell you, do that. Okay? I'm more than happy to discuss anything about the whole process with you, but I'm not going to tell you you should do that or you shouldn't do that. Okay, it's entirely up to you. Okay, so that's the assessment. Yeah, the engagement and feedback. Bring your laptop with you. Bring your tablet or your smartphone. We will be using during the lecture. I'll be asking some questions. I'll put them on Socrative. Socrative is just an online platform. If you haven't used it before, if I told you before, so probably you know what Socrative is. But if you don't know, Socrative is just an online platform where I ask question, then you log in on the platform, you answer the question. Why is it important to do that? This is very important for individual feedback. So if I want to give you individual feedback for you about your work, this is not going to contribute to your final mark. So this is just for like formative assessment. This is something to tell you how you're doing in the module, how much, or if there is any problems or any issues or any questions that you don't understand. So of course you still can ask questions in the lecture. That's absolutely fine, but also you need to respond to these questions. So to do that, you'll need to bring your tablet, your smartphone, your laptop, whatever, anything that can connect to the internet. Okay, that is the main idea here. So please bring your device next time to the lecture, and this is the room number. I will put again in every lecture. I'll put it, so don't worry, so you don't have to remember the room number. So all what you need to do is just you're going to look to Socrative website, put the room number, and you'll see the questions, and I will guide you through this. So it's not something that you should worry about. Just all what I want you to do is to bring your smart device with you. Anything that you can connect to the internet and you can log in on Socrative. Yeah, as I said, the lectures are recorded, so I'll record all lectures. These lectures will be on Blackboard, along with any other material, data sets you need to use. In some lectures, I'll be referring to papers. I can't upload these papers, but you still can have access to these papers through the university I find. So you can find them online. The lectures will be uploaded to Hanomics, my YouTube channel, and then I will share the links on Blackboard. As I said, the lecture is broadcast live, so it's now we've got people who are watching the lecture at the same time. And in case of you wondering, the material for this module will be on the Economic Society website, but the lecture is live on the Economic Society Facebook. Yeah, this is the important part here, eViews. This is the statistical package we will use. Of course, eViews is available in all university computers. So if you're working from university, any of the computers here in the university already has eViews. But if you wanna have a copy in your own computer, so you can buy the student version, this is how much it costs you. Or instead, you can download the student version Lite, and it's for free. So just follow this link, and you'll find both. So if you wanna, it's just this one is more restrictive, the student version Lite, and you will use it in case if you want to do something or practice at home, but you will have to use the one here on campus, especially when you want, as you will see in the assignment, you need to submit the program. So all the commands you've used, you need to write something similar to, but I'll show you how to do that. But to do that, I think the student version Lite wouldn't allow you to do that. So there's some restriction in using this one, but you still can use it for just practicing. But at the end, you don't have to buy it. You can use the computer on a computer on campus. So that's one thing. So what if I know nothing about eViews? What if I haven't done anything with eViews before? Or what if I just simply forget? I've done this 2 years ago, and now I don't remember anymore. So this is your main source of training material. This is on, again, this is the link. Okay, so start with you from basics, how to create a work file, how to work with graphs, etc. So you really have no excuses. Everything is there, including the data set. And these are videos as well. So it shows you step by step how to do it. Okay, so for example, in the next seminar, I'll be telling you what we need to do. So you need to do this before you come. So do you have any question about what I said so far? Is there anything that you are worried about? Especially if you haven't used eViews before. Okay. I'll take this as no. There's no problem. No questions. Okay. That's the surprise. In the seminars, I'm not going to teach anything. See people like... Okay, so what we'll do is I'll record videos. Okay? It's a 10 minutes video. And you have to watch this before you come to the seminar. So in the video, I'll show you what I want you to do. Okay? And then in the seminar, so you've done already the tasks that you were supposed to do in the seminar. And in the actual seminar, we're actually practicing. We're doing something different. Okay? And I'll be available if you have any questions. Okay? So that's the idea of having a flipped classroom. So you have the material recorded. Okay? And say for the next seminar, so we don't have seminars this week. So the seminar, I think, is on Thursday. Okay? So on this Thursday, so a week before the seminar, you will see the material you need to revise. So you've got a whole week to watch 10 minutes video and probably give it like 15 minutes practicing or half an hour maximum, even if you haven't done eViews before. It wouldn't take you more than half an hour to do it. You're just going to follow what I have done in the video. So you learn it, you find out that in the seminar, then we do something different. Okay? And I'll be available there, just give you some tasks, and I'll be walking around to answer your question. The reason I'm doing this, because from my experience, people never go with you like in the same pace. You'll see people who finish early, and then you find them on Facebook. Okay? these people are like get bored very easily because it's especially for those who are behind and want help to do the task, then you actually try to help them, and at the same time you're leaving other people just wasting their time. So my point is, in the seminar, if you finish the tasks we want to do in 10 minutes and you want to go, I'm happy for you to go. Okay, because that's why I want you to learn, and if you demonstrate, you show that you really learned it, so there's no point to waste your time. I'm not going to ask you to spend another half an hour sitting there in a seminar room on Facebook just because you're bored and you don't want to listen to me. Okay, so you come to the seminar to learn something, you've done it, then you have to go. So it's up to you. Okay, so please, on Thursday, you'll see the videos you want to watch for the next seminar, which is next week. So you've got a week, 7 days, plenty of time to watch 10 minutes, please. Okay, and I promise I'm not going to make it long video, so it's going to be very short video. Okay, but again, if you ever need help with basics, please just go back to this page. This page is amazing. I personally learned a lot from this about eViews, how to use eViews. Okay, so I've never had like a training course or any. I didn't even. I don't remember even if I'd done it in my undergraduate or no. Definitely haven't done it in my undergraduate, even in my postgraduate. So it was like self-learning process, and that was really very rich source of information and sessions, different videos, data. And even you have the PowerPoint they give you, can download the PowerPoint. So just spend some time there if you haven't worked with the views before, even if you have done and you need some something like to refresh your mind about these, just go back to this, go on this webpage and you'll see lots of material there. Okay, so anyone do you have any question about the flipped seminars? What does it mean? So the good news for me is I'm not going to teach anything. That's what it means to me. Okay? So what it means to you, is it clear what is required? So you just need to watch 10 minutes video before the seminar. Okay? And the seminar, I'll give you some tasks. I'm not going to put these tasks on Blackboard before the seminar because you are meant to come and show that you've done the 10 minutes video. So basically you'll be able to do the task, but if I give you the tasks before the seminar, then you probably you wouldn't turn up. So I want you to come to the seminars. So giving you the 10 minutes video doesn't replace the seminar. I want you to attend the seminar, but I want you to give more time to practice in the seminar. Okay, rather than wasting half an hour just teaching you how to do things, I'll do it in 10 minutes in a video, and then in the seminar we'll practice together. Okay? We'll do different activities. We'll see how we're going to use that time. I'll send you the link on Blackboard. So yes, it will be in my YouTube channel, yes, but rather than getting you lost in my YouTube channel, it doesn't have many videos anyway, but it will build up. So I'll send you the link. I'll say, this is the link for the next week. Please watch that before the next week, before you come. Okay? Yeah, but feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, my office hours. So my office hours are Monday and Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30. My office is in this building. SOM 208 is in the second floor. Okay, so one floor above this. This is my email address. If you wanna, if you can't make it during my office hours and you wanna meet me, so I'm happy to give you an appointment. Just send me an email and I'll give you an appointment. Okay, and please make the most of this opportunity, like to meet me and discuss any concerns you have about this module, about any lecture, anything you don't understand, anything about the assignment. So this is when you should come and discuss this with me, and I'll be happy even if I need to repeat things that I explain in the lecture. I'm happy to do that, but I will ask you to watch the recording, the lecture recording first. Okay, just make sure you watch first, and you still don't understand, come and talk to me. Let's sit and do it together. Okay, so I'm very happy to discuss any issues you may have, any questions you may have. Just pop in during my office hours. You don't need to book an appointment if you're coming during these times. So if you're coming Monday or Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30, you don't need to contact me. Just pop into my office. I'll be there waiting for you. But the email there, my email is there just in case if you can't make it during this time, you've got some other commitments, but you still want to to meet me or to see me, just please drop me an email, and I'm more than happy to give you an appointment. Okay, so these are there's no textbook really for this module, but there are some ideas about where you can go. So these are like some examples of the textbook you could look at. So this is probably the simplest one, and then go to the more advanced one. Probably is the last one. So it's up to you. So you can look wherever you want. But again, as we go, I'll be posting some research papers to look at, some specific chapters to read. But again, I'm very flexible with that. You can learn from wherever source you prefer, whatever textbook you like, something you've done in the past, and something you prefer. It's totally up to you. Okay, so it's time for you to ask questions. Please ask one question. Okay, the exam structure. I think it's in the model handbook already, but I think it will be section A, a question that you have to answer. Section B, 2 questions, you choose one. If I remember. Just go back to the model handbook, and I haven't put the exam yet. So, but I think that's how I'm thinking of the exam. So it's 2 sections. Section A, I think it's 60%, and you have to answer that section. Section B, you'll have 2 questions, and then you choose one of 2. Okay? Mainly, yes, but it could be something a little bit more than just interpreting data. So you, as I said, you need to explain any limitations of any method you use. So it could be more. It will be more interpretation, yes, but it will be again is more about the intuition, why we use this methodology, what are the limitations, what are the problems in this estimation. So or this researcher X estimated that model, and tell me what you think of this, or if there's anything any comments, how you would comment on this in this way of doing something or addressing some question. I mean, different ways. But the most important thing is just don't worry about the exam, because I'm happy to discuss this with you before the exam. So how would you like to be assessed in the exam? So this is something hopefully we'll have the chance to talk about. Okay, so this is the list of the references. These are the textbook, in addition to the paper I referred to in the beginning. Okay, so just in case if you're wondering. Any question? So how do you feel about the model? Is there anything that you would like to change? I mean, if we go through in a similar way, anything you would like to see? I mean, you don't have to answer me now. Just think about it. Next time when we meet, just tell me. Okay? Okay, good. So the deal now is on Thursday, you'll find a link. I'll send you a link to the video you need to watch, and then we'll meet on next Thursday to do the seminar. But again, we have a lecture next Monday, and we'll talk about in more detail about the assumptions we made about the OLS, and then hopefully we'll have some more examples, some papers to refer to as well. Any questions? Thank you for coming today, and I'll see you next week. So there's no seminars this week. Seminars will start from next week, but the lecture is in the same time, the same place next week. Okay? Thank you.